When a driver in a car that the policeman has stopped rolls down his window, his life takes a surprising turn. On the highway, Michael Patterson, a devoted state trooper who took pleasure in his work, was performing a routine traffic stop for windows with unusually dark tints. He had no idea that this experience would turn out to be something special and unforgettable for both him and the driver. The infraction of tinted window restrictions set off an unexpected and remarkable encounter that began as a straightforward job. Michael thought his normal day as a state trooper would start out like any other, enforcing traffic laws. He spent a lot of his time stopping people who were breaking the law. The routine grew boring after making several stops, especially considering that speed was the primary offense. Dealing with angry people further contributed to the job's banal aspects. One lovely summer's day in early June, Michael was cruising the Kingwood Township roadway when he spotted a white BMW that stood out. This was not the kind of car he usually stopped. It wasn't speeding or acting strangely. Rather, the windows appeared too tinted, which made it difficult to see through for the driver. Michael was determined to make sure everyone was safe. So he looked into it more, since he knew that windows with too much tint might be dangerous because they would make it harder to see. As an officer, Michael knew that tinted windows are generally meant to block out the sun. But if they are too dark, it can become dangerous and impair visibility. He handled the tinted window infraction out of a desire to stop any potential harm, even in situations that appear normal. Michael understood the significance of making sure everyone is safe on the road, even if such transgressions are sometimes overlooked. But this wasn't your normal ticket-seeking scenario for infractions involving heavy tint. Police officers are usually too busy to deal with tint tickets. But because of the unusually dark window tint, 26-year-old State Trooper Michael Patterson made an exception. He stopped, turned on his lights and sirens, and the driver, assuming he would get in trouble and be fined, pulled over to the side of the road. Remarkably, Michael, who was well known for his cordial manner, left his lights flashing and made a nice approach to the BMW driver. The two men got to know one another better as they struck up a conversation at the front windows, which resulted in an unexpected revelation. After being outraged about the stop at first, the motorist revealed that he was a 30-year retired police officer who had enjoyed his work. He was pulled over for a tint violation, which was awkward, but he handled it coolly because he was familiar with the law because of his experience in law enforcement. Remarkably, the driver was more concerned about how his BMW looked with the tint than about getting into trouble with another police officer. Realizing that the tint went above the allowed amount, he acknowledged that it needed to be addressed and mentioned getting in touch with the people who did the tinting. After finding out about the driver's prior career as a police officer, the conversation took an interesting turn and Michael found himself thinking back on it often. After bonding over their common experiences, the two made the most important connection of Michael's career. Out of what seemed like a normal traffic stop in a matter of minutes, Michael's life was profoundly impacted by this meeting, which was caught on tape by both his body cam and the cameras in his car. Thankful for having captured this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity on camera, Michael observed the ordinary traffic stop turning into a more in-depth discussion. Matthew Bailey, the driver, disclosed that he was also a former police officer. The two men, who were no longer on active service, found a lot in common and had many shared experiences, which made their accidental meeting on a typical workday all the more enjoyable. As they got off subject and talked about the difficulties and oddities of being police officers, Matthew revealed that he had previously worked at a city some 40 miles from Piscataway, where they were now living. Intrigued by this knowledge, Michael was unprepared for the shocking disclosure that came next. To Michael's surprise, Matthew revealed specifics about his employment history and the location in which he had previously worked. A city in where Michael was born and where his mother was still living. It was an astounding coincidence for Michael to learn that the individual he had pulled over was not only a fellow police officer but also had strong ties to his hometown. Michael was intrigued and decided to find out if Matthew worked in the same place where he was born. Michael was shocked to learn that Matthew was a police officer in his hometown. Michael knew a few police officers in the city, but he wasn't sure if Matthew was the same guy he was thinking of, a police officer who may have been involved in an odd incident 26 years prior. Michael was intrigued and his ears perked up as he imagined that Matthew might be the person he had been thinking about. A police officer who might have been engaged in a strange incident in Michael's past, a story he had never told anyone. Matthew kept asking about Michael's age and hometown, which strengthened their connection and made them wonder if their coincidental meeting would reveal an important but long-forgotten aspect of Michael's past. Michael and Matthew realized how much they needed to talk about when they ran into a fellow officer who was from his hometown. It was surprisingly easy to carry on their conversation, particularly once Michael disclosed that he was born in Piscataway, a city he was familiar with. After finding out that Michael was born in 1991, Matthew became curious and started looking for further details. He remembered an incident that had happened over 30 years prior and wondered if Michael had anything to do with it. Matthew was shocked to learn that Michael's birthday was October 5, 1991. He inquired excitedly about the Piscataway road where Michael was raised. They had to come to their own conclusions, even if Michael was pretty certain of his response. In an odd turn of events, they both recognized that they might have met before when they started detailing the specifics of an incident that happened more than 26 years ago. This understanding had the potential of an incredible revelation. Matthew's suspicions were validated when Michael disclosed that he was raised on Poe Place, the same street where a young police officer named Matthew had been called to a scene on October 5, 1991. Matthew was shocked to learn that Michael had acknowledged him, thinking that he might have known the state policeman years before. Matthew told the whole narrative, leaning out of his window, a story he had carried around in his heart for years. With vivid memories of the little town's Poe Place dead-end street, Matthew described how, as a rookie police officer, he had responded to a call. With just 4 years of experience at the time, he was dispatched to Poe Place after receiving a call. Matthew described the special characteristics of that specific call. Women usually have a few days to get ready for labor with steadily stronger contractions. But unlike any previous labor experience, this one was unique, characterized by contractions that began slowly and then increased. Matthew's investigation into the specifics of that memorable evening was going to take an even more remarkable turn when their previous relationship came to light. It is true that labor does not always proceed as expected, and sometimes it does not go as planned for a woman. Sometimes labor progresses far more quickly or slowly than is usually expected, which might surprise women. Though Michael's mother had gone through labor previously, this time it felt different. The contractions were spaced apart and less severe. Michael's mother realized she had to move quickly because she was worried she wouldn't be ready for how quickly labor was progressing. She made the decision to phone her husband for assistance in order to prevent the chance of giving birth by the side of the road. She was calm on the outside, but as she waited, The discomfort grew. And she soon realized that the child was approaching too quickly to get to the hospital in time. Both of Michael's parents took decisive action and phoned for emergency help and assistance from their doctor. An emergency medical technician, EMT, was called in to help with the impending birth. When word reached Matthew that Karen, a lady, was critically ill at Poe Place, he followed his gut and raced to the scene to try to save as many lives as he could. At that point, Karen was a married mother who was about 39 weeks along with her second kid. She unexpectedly went into labor on October 5 while out and about with her 10-year-old eldest son, Tarek. She didn't anticipate how quickly the contractions would get so bad that it was difficult for her to walk back to the car. She was in a lot of discomfort. But she knew she had to get food paid for quickly and get Tarek and back home to Poe Place. The sequence of events prepared the audience for a remarkable and unanticipated delivery that would profoundly affect Matthew and Michael's families. Karen was able to safely make it home because Poe Place wasn't too far from the grocery store. Her son Tarek was naturally terrified and unable to help. So she tied her knees together tightly and tried to bear the discomfort during the drive. When they got home, Karen's husband Bobby was waiting for them and rushed to her rescue. Bobby quickly called 911 and Karen's doctor after picking her up and bringing her inside for more comfort. They realized they required expert aid immediately because of the severity of the situation and their inability to get to the hospital in time. Officer Bailey responded on the scene as the closest police officer to Poe Place in response to the dispatch call. Especially considering the impending birth, Karen and Bobby were relieved to see him. Officer Bailey maintained her composure despite her lack of experience as a police officer and her background in emergency response. He wasn't an obstetrician or medical expert, but he communicated with Karen's doctor over the phone the entire time to make sure the delivery went smoothly. Officer Bailey and the doctor worked together to deliver a healthy baby in a remarkable turn of events. The already amazing tale of Karen's unplanned delivery was enhanced by the peculiar circumstances of having a police officer assist with labor, particularly outside of a hospital setting. When Michael thinks back on this extraordinary occurrence, he never could have imagined that the policeman who delivered him all those years ago would one day come into contact with him. The incidents demonstrated the unpredictable nature of life. Because it is uncommon for people to have police officers deliver their children. Women usually deliver their babies in a car or by the side of the road. Or they make it to the hospital. The fact that there was a youngster at home and a policeman could help, especially at the last minute, made the timing of these occurrences extremely remarkable and unforgettable. Although most police officers never deliver a child, they are trained and equipped to handle such unforeseen circumstances. Officers who get to witness it view it as a singular, incredible occurrence that often comes only once in a lifetime. Despite the fact that it may appear a little disorganized at the time. Even though the incident happened about 30 years ago, Matthew could still clearly recall it. During the birth, Officer Bailey, now Matthew, took complete charge and made sure everything was in place for the baby to be delivered safely. Since Matthew arrived in the latter stages of Karen's labor, the entire experience took place in a matter of minutes. Before delivering the infant to his parents, Matthew went above and beyond, even taking a moment to untangle the baby's umbilical cord from his small neck. Both Michael and Matthew saw their meeting as a remarkable occurrence and a lucky break. They understood the importance of the occasion and were grateful to have shared it with each other. Michael was reluctant to split ways, but he knew how important it was to get back to work. He was proud to have met the man who had been instrumental In his life's journey, Michael couldn't help but think back on how this singular encounter had affected his life as he said goodbye. It had always made him proud to be delivered by a police officer. And it even inspired him to become a police officer. The interaction Michael had with Matthew was deeply personal to him and influenced both his identity and his professional goals. Michael was hoping to see Matthew again. But he wasn't sure if Matthew felt the same way. Nevertheless, equipped with Matthew's address, he made the decision to initiate action. Considering the history and their surprising bond, Michael found it impossible to imagine a ticket being issued for anything as insignificant as dark tint. Officer Bailey's help in giving birth continued to be one of his favorite on-the-job experiences. The memory lingered for years and brought him comfort, though it was difficult and stressful for Matthew to convey. Michael Patterson's tale. The happiness he experienced at safely bringing a new life into the world outweighed all the difficulties. He began to cry as he related the specifics of the call, such as the peculiar circumstances surrounding the birth of a kid on Poe Place. Michael was astounded by what he was hearing as Matthew went deeper into the story. Startled and full of enthusiasm, Michael revealed with great excitement that he was the child Matthew had delivered 26 years before. It was difficult for Matthew to accept that Michael was, in fact, that child, even after some initial misgivings and bizarre coincidences. Michael persisted, giving specifics about his mother Karen, his birth date, and his home birth circumstances. Both guys realized after a few seconds of reflection that this unusual reunion was, in fact, true. They were standing on the side of the road, amazed at the incredible turn of events that led to their fortuitous encounter, which was facilitated by the BMW's tinted windows. As they talked more about the amazing coincidence, Michael told Karen exactly when he was born, on October 5th. 26 years ago, at home. Both men were amazed at the little things that had brought them together. And it took them some time to completely comprehend the tremendous significance of what had happened. Meeting the child he had brought into the world and watching him develop into a capable police officer was a fantastic sensation for Matthew. The interaction turned into one of Matthew's most treasured professional tales, exemplifying the perfect resolution to a traffic stop that typically leaves both sides feeling worse off. Officer Patterson in this instance did not issue a ticket, and both men drove off in a feeling of shock and elation, greatly brightening their 2 days. Following the meeting, Matthew and Michael gave their wives calls to share the amazing coincidence. The families were similarly astonished and concluded that it was even less likely than striking lightning or winning the lottery. The meeting had left their wives so taken aback that all Michael and Matthew had done was shake hands and laugh together. Their wives immediately asked if contact details had been shared. Michael made the decision to look into it and get in touch with Matthew, even though Michael finally decided not to issue a ticket after obtaining his driver's license and all the required paperwork. He was lucky to have Matthew's home address, thankful for another opportunity to get to know the guy who had helped him. Michael wrote a message quickly and drove over to Matthew's house to drop it off. When Matthew found the message on his door, he was appreciative that Michael had taken the initiative to reach out. Matthew quickly called Michael to set up a follow-up meeting after realizing that he should have asked for his contact information earlier. Matthew invited Michael's family to lunch, along with him and his wife. Everyone rejoiced at the endearing coincidence, since it appeared that fate had brought these two people together. There was no other rationale offered for this lucky break-in. Michael was disappointed with the encounter. Even if they were in a different city, he desired more time spent with Matthew. Michael wanted more time. Maybe selfishly, to spend with the man who had helped him. They had a precious and rare bond. Having obtained Matthew's address, Michael recognized that he could do this by paying him a visit. After meeting Matthew, there was one thing Michael couldn't wait to tell his mother about. Michael imagined her excitement when he told her about the policeman who had helped him, and he looked forward to her call. Michael's mother was very upset when he told her the information. He was eager to tell her even more details as it turned into one of the strangest moments of his life. When Michael talked about the encounter with his mother, she described it as an equally amazing and thrilling experience that no one could duplicate, a similarly unforgettable moment in her life. Michael's mother felt hopeful when she learned of Matthew's successful life and his retirement from the police department. She wanted to thank Matthew directly for everything he had done for her on that difficult day when she gave birth to Michael. On their front steps, a difficult birth, to be sure, especially without medication. All Michael's mother wanted to do was thank Matthew for everything he had done, particularly during the birth. She would have to set up a meeting in order to accomplish that. They decided to get together for what ended up being one of the most fascinating days of their lives. They were going to talk about everything that had happened in their lives over the last 30 years over supper. Michael found the gathering to be fascinating and couldn't wait to get to know more of Matthew's relatives. They were looking forward to talking, knowing that they were becoming a single big family after all. It was a beautiful circumstance, however unusual. And when others heard about it, they couldn't stop talking about it. They all became closer as a result of the crazy exciting excursion becoming viral. Michael wanted to invite his mother Karen, who Matthew had assisted years before, to lunch as well. When Karen learned about her son's accidental encounter with Officer Bailey, she was shocked. She would always be grateful to Matthew for helping her through one of the most difficult situations of her life. The two families got together for a heartfelt and emotional reunion when Karen arrived at the Bailey residence. Everyone was thankful that a chance traffic stop had brought them all back together, although they admitted that they could have easily gone through life without ever running into each other. They all agreed that the insignificant coincidence had a profound effect on them all. They decided to get together more often after taking photos, laughing, and even choosing to stay friends. The encounter with a childhood hero was an uncommon and noteworthy event that affected all those who were present. That concludes the first narrative. Now let's watch another similar story. Many people use public transit on a daily basis to get from one place to another. Most people choose the bus over other forms of transportation because it's inexpensive and convenient. Although it is acknowledged that driving a bus is a difficult job that is devoid of joy, the conversation will center on the life-changing experience of a bus driver whose life took an unexpected turn after meeting new people on the bus. The narrative deviates from everyday reality in a strange way, challenging established beliefs about bus drivers. The story exposes the bus driver to two strangers who had a profound impact on his life. Bus drivers typically work in everyday situations without much thought given to unexpected events. Thus their usual career trajectory was thrown off when they encountered an unprecedented situation. In their everyday operations, bus drivers usually stick to predetermined routes, transporting passengers who are known as regulars. These passengers, who consistently travel to work or school each day, travel on the same route as the bus driver. The drivers are able to recognize strangers with ease because of their familiarity with the regulars. The bus driver saw two people on this particular day who were obviously not your typical passengers. The story then turns to Tim Watson, a bus driver with the Valley Transportation Authority in San Francisco who is renowned for his consideration for other people. Some of the passengers have become friends with Tim because of the bonds they have shared. But when he watched the two strange faces get on his bus, he knew they weren't from around here, though there were smiles and good-natured conversations among the passengers, which seemed to indicate their general fondness for Tim. These two people appeared clearly distressed. Tim noticed the guy and son who had boarded the bus while driving his customary route. He felt something was off, but he held off on making snap decisions, putting his responsibilities of driving the bus safely ahead of his preconceived notions about his passengers. He kept watching them in the rearview mirror, convinced that these two strangers who had gotten on his bus weren't normal customers. The man, who looked to be in his mid-20s, was holding a small boy's hand tightly and appeared to be very upset. It was obvious that he was trying to stop the child from going off. They both chose seats in the middle row, and it was soon apparent that something was wrong. Tim's main worry turned to the small child, who was obviously not feeling up for a bus ride. Tim discounted the sobbing at first, thinking it was just normal toddler behavior. He had seen this happen hundreds of times before. But then he noticed something odd. This little boy cried the entire way, in contrast to the typical pattern where kids cry for a bit and then stop. This observation caused him to shift his perspective. It surprised Tim, not knowing where they were going, that the man with the child did not try to console him. The dad was deep in concentration as he gripped the child's hand tightly, not letting go for even a second. Tim noticed that other passengers were becoming impatient with the child's incessant weeping. One even inquired as to the child's well-being. The dad answered, and the youngster ignored the question, keeping his head down. The dad appeared to regain his control as they traveled, telling the young boy to stop sobbing and go to sleep until they arrived at their destination. Tim, who understood the vulnerability of youngsters, disagreed with the tone, rather of giving youngsters sudden instructions. He thought it was better to explain things to them in a way they might understand, even though Tim was always looking via the rearview mirror to ensure passenger safety. He found it difficult to observe the two of them. Passengers boarded and alighted at each station, but these strangers paid little attention to their surroundings, neither raising their heads to see which stops were ahead nor making an effort to get out of their seats. They appeared hesitant to get off the bus, and there was a bit of a misunderstanding when everyone got off the bus at the next stop except for this strange couple. Confused by their actions, Tim decided he'd had enough and asked them straight out where they were going. But there was silence in response to his inquiries. Tim was not deterred and tried again to make sure they were okay. But neither of them answered. Tim was surprised when the small child finally broke the stillness and expressed his hunger, even though he was resigned to the looming last stop. Tim was shocked to hear the child's voice, but he expected the young guy to react. But he was met with more coldness. The boy continued to declare that he was hungry, but the young guy did not reply. Tim proposed stopping at a gas station for snacks, worried by the apparent lack of concern for the child's needs. The young man insisted they were okay. But Tim, feeling his father's empathy, pulled over for an unplanned fuel stop, taking a chance and going into the store. He bought the starving child some chips and candy. When Tim got back to the bus, the young man was watching over the boy and gave him the snacks, which he gratefully accepted. Tim grinned as he took his place again, watching the small child gobble up the food like though he hadn't eaten in weeks. Tim started the engine again and drove the bus along its usual route. Not realizing the shocking news that was waiting for him. Tim had no idea that he was going to learn something very surprising. About the two people sitting directly behind him. The specifics of this discovery will become clearer soon. Since the bus and the fascinating three made their way down the route, stopping at the designated locations. A lot of others got on and off the bus at different stops. But the mysterious couple stayed on. Tim's worries grew. And a litany of inquiries overflowed his thoughts. Where were they going? On the bus. What were they doing? Did the kids fare well? Tim was hesitant to use the rearview mirror to check on passengers. But his sense of duty and empathy overrode his doubts. And he couldn't help but notice the small youngster who made him think of his own kids. Tim felt something strange stirring inside him, making him think about it more carefully. It finally occurred to him, a realization that would change everything for the three of them. Tim was staring at the kid in the rearview mirror when he remembered hearing recently about a boy who went missing. Tim was reviewing the specifics of a 3-year-old's disappearance from a San Francisco library when he spotted something that drew his attention. Tim checked the missing person report in the local newspaper and confirmed that the 3-year-old was last seen with red Crocs, shorts, and a blue shirt. Tim felt the parts begin to fit together. He had a sickening thought that the small boy he saw on his bus might be the child reported missing in the newspaper. As a father of 2, Tim felt the weight of the situation very deeply. Tim thought about the pain the boy's parents must be going through, not knowing where their child was or how he was doing. And he felt a great deal of empathy. If his own kids were in the same situation, he could only imagine the turmoil that would envelop him. Driven by these thoughts, Tim thought about the significance of the report on missing persons and the useful data it offered in helping to locate the missing. Tim stared at the rearview mirror as he tried to process the seriousness of what he was seeing, remembering the specifics of the missing child's outfit. Though the bus was crowded with other riders, Tim kept a close eye on the youngster. Concerned for everyone's safety, he resisted the temptation to confront the man who was with the child because he knew that there was danger and ambiguity involved. Reluctant to reveal his suspicions to the man, Tim kept his composure. Tim was cautious because he knew that if this was the lost youngster, it was a rare chance to bring him back to his family. Tim controlled his impulse to constantly check the rearview mirror while driving the bus at a steady pace, resisting the need to do anything strange that may alert suspicions. For the sake of the child and the other unwary passengers, Tim was determined not to compromise this crucial time. He put on a brave face of normalcy, hiding how serious things really were. But for a little while Tim wondered as he felt the man who was with the youngster become impatient. The man seemed like he wanted to get off the bus as soon as possible. Tim took action to make sure the father stayed on the bus with the boy because he recognized the urgency and the impending destination. Tim battled his anxiety as he realized he had to take responsibility for the dire situation, and that time was running short. Trying not to lose his cool, his legs shaking so much that he could barely drive, Tim decided what to do. He announced publicly over the loudspeaker that a prior passenger had left a green rucksack on the bus, hoping to divert attention and keep everything appearing normal. Tim emphasized that people shouldn't freak out and said he would see if the luggage was still on board, appearing composed and professional. He began a slow and methodical search for the child's backpack, in an attempt to gain valuable time to make sure the child was secure before the bus arrived at its destination. Tim persisted in telling passengers that the search was standard procedure while hiding his actual goal, which was to thoroughly inspect the boy and determine whether Or not, he was the missing child from the library. Tim was seated in the middle of the bus. So this was his only chance to examine the child's appearance and clothing. Tim was confident that this was the same missing youngster after noticing that the blue shirt, plaid shorts, and red Crocs fit the description exactly as it appeared in the morning newspaper. Tim realized this and went back to his seat to consider his next course of action. Knowing that going it alone may make things worse, he came up with a calculated plan. The loudness of the engine offered shelter as the bus was crowded with passengers. Through the rearview mirror, Tim caught sight of the thoughtful man and took advantage of the moment. He made a crucial choice though. He picked up the phone and started a conversation while driving. In spite of his nervousness and shaking hands, Tim called the police, telling them everything that had happened and asking for advice on what to do next. His description fitted up well with what the authorities already knew about the missing youngster. Tim kept his cool and listened carefully as the cops made plans and gave him instructions on what to do next. Though fear lurked, his will to help the young child and work with the authorities strengthened his resolve. Tim was reassured by the police that they would be waiting at the next stop, even though they admitted that he was probably apprehensive, telling him to act like nothing had occurred. Tim forced a phony grin to cover up his internal conflict and walked toward the impending police meeting spot, prepared to fulfill his vital role in the search for the missing youngster. Tim was the bus driver, and how well he carried out the plan determined its outcome. He kept his eyes on the kidnapper and was happy that there were no indicators of awareness of the cops waiting at the next stop. The thought of the little boy soon being back with his family made Tim's heart sing. He imagined the child's smile taking the place of the tears and worry that had accompanied his bus ride. Tim was relieved to see two police officers waiting as the bus pulled up to the prearranged stop. The police presence assured the child's safety and signaled a peaceful resolution. As planned, police told passengers to get off the bus one by one. Since everyone had faith in the authorities, there was little resistance. The dad and the young boy were about to get off the boat. One of the policemen gently moved the child away from the abductor, as the other pulled the two apart. The officers were unwavering in the face of the man's resistance. It became clear that the youngster under their care was, in fact, the library boy who had gone missing. For more inquiry, the police brought the youngster and the man to the station. The family hurried to the police station at the same time they were told about the scenario by the police. The mother of the child was sobbing during their emotional reunion at the station, while the father hugged and kissed his son. After a terrifying ordeal in the days before, the family was overjoyed to receive the miracle call and be able to finally hold their kid. Tim felt a great feeling of relaxation as he thought back on the entire experience. His instincts, possibly influenced by his fatherly instincts, had warned him that something was wrong from the minute the two of them got on the bus. Tim's activities were critical to the little boy's safety and happy reunion with his family, demonstrating the value of quick thinking and well-coordinated law enforcement operations. Tim's actions struck an emotional chord with everyone concerned. At this crucial period, prayers were said for the innocent child's healing and recovery from this horrific experience because of the unimaginable hardship he had gone through. Tim's parents, the police, and the entire city were incredibly proud of him and celebrated his brave acts in saving the life of a youngster. It was accepted that Tim's excellent memory, his fatherly instincts, and his good judgment were the main factors in the successful conclusion. The tale quickly became well known and was featured in all local newspapers and news programs. Tim had no idea that he had become a local celebrity. In interviews, he modestly said, "I feel like I just did what any father would do." The city cheered for him, and many who had read the tale expressed their gratitude. Heralded as a hero, Tim served as a reminder that not all superheroes have capes. This deep experience demonstrated the unpredictable nature of life and made Tim an unexpected hero. In retrospect, Tim highlighted the value of following one's intuition, saying, "We should always trust our guts, as it's never wrong." The child's family was incredibly appreciative of Tim, feeling that he had restored their hope. There was evident pride in Tim's family, and his activities had an impact not just on the community but also on his own family. The idea that Tim ought to win Father of the Year encapsulated the feeling. Tim gave insightful counsel to everyone in an interview, saying, "If you feel something in your gut, you have to go with it. Having hesitations could end up." The story leaves us with the knowledge that Tim's bravery, empathy, and quick thinking not only improved the lives of those who were directly affected but also worked as a potent reminder of the enormous influence that one person's actions and intuition can have when faced with hardship.